The American blackbelly sheep and the Barbados blackbelly don't just share similarities in their names, but also in how they look. So how do they differ exactly? And is one superior to the other? Well, there's a little more to it than that. So let's get into it and look at both breeds and how they compare to each other. The Barbados blackbelly sheep came first, and as their name implies, their origins lie in the Caribbean islands. The European wool sheep just didn't do well in the island heat, so they were bred with African hair sheep with the hopes of producing a fleece sheep that could tolerate the heat and the exotic diseases that were present in the Caribbean. They didn't exactly get a fleece-carrying sheep, but they did get an excellent meat-quality animal that had very good fertility rates and a hardiness that was second to none. The Barbados blackbelly spent its time on its island home from the 1600s all the way to 1902 before they were even considered as an option for anywhere else. Texans took a liking to them, especially because they're so disease-resistant and for their good foraging capabilities. But using them for active large-scale farming was discarded almost as soon as they arrived, and they were crossbred with feral sheep and rambouillets. The South wanted big horns, and the intention was to produce a game animal that looked good on a wall but still produced a juicy chop. The Barbados had a striking pelt, but no horns at all. So the ferals and the rambouillet genes remedied that lack of horn. And it's here that the Barbados and the American blackbellies became two separate species. But we'll get to the American blackbellies in just a second. You see, the Barbados line only had pure stock back in the Caribbean, and even back on their home soil, their numbers were quite low. It wasn't until the 70s before moves were made to preserve the 400-year-old breed. North Carolina State University imported a few of the pure Barbados blackbelly sheep and began to breed them with specific plans to preserve the breed. The university still has a large flock that they hold onto for research purposes, and because they're just a little chuffed with themselves for getting the breed back from the brink of extinction. And they have every right to celebrate. They managed to achieve more than what most breeding programs have been able to accomplish in almost no time at all. And now we get to the American blackbelly sheep. Since the two share so much of their DNA with each other, you can imagine that they're pretty close in comparison to each other. Even though they technically began their journey in 1902, it wasn't until the 1970s that the breed was truly finalized. You see, back when they were bred to produce more impressive horns, it wasn't always done with their health or practicality in mind. Sometimes those horns got so big and curved so much that it obscured their faces and therefore their sight, making them an easy target for predators and prone to eye conditions. They kept breeding them with the rambouillets and mouflon sheep until they got a hair sheep that stood at the medium-size range, just like the Barbados, but at least by then their horns were more stable and curved for 30 inches or more. The Barbados is a little longer in the leg, but they both still clock in at anywhere between 90 to 125 pounds. Only the rams have horns, but they all have those distinctive facial markings. A lot of people refer to the American blackbellies as badger-faced. Now, if you weren't familiar with the breed, they'd look identical at a distance. The American has slightly more pronounced black markings on its face, those distinctive horns, and it has longer hair, where the Barbados is smooth-coated. Neither are fleece sheep. They're strictly here to produce meat for you, but the American is a little more, shall we say, shaggy. The Barbados is more fertile. Triplets, quintuplets, and even 5 or 6 lambs per birth are not out of the ordinary at all. When they get to 5 or more, at least one lamb will be stunted or a stillbirth. But that's to be expected when a ewe needs to supply resources to such a large amount of babies. Unfortunately, one will just get less. But a loss of 1 lamb out of 5 or 6 is still nothing to scoff at. You're still going to get a hell of a lot of lambs from one ewe. But that's about where the differences for the two end. They're very comparable in every other way: meat, lambing, disease, all of it. So let's have a look at those characteristics. Meat-wise, both have a very flavorful carcass that isn't as heavy in fat as mutton usually is. But unlike other lean sheep, they don't taste like game. It's very obviously mutton, just without that thick layer of fat. When you look at fertility and ease of lambing, both are very fertile and don't need your help to deliver lambs on their own. What makes the blackbellies unique is that they aren't bound to seasonal lambing. They can be safely bred every 8 to 9 months, and American blackbelly ewes regularly drop twins, and every now and then, triplets will make an appearance, so they're still more fertile than average. They have enough milk to keep their babies fed, but additional supplementation might be necessary if triplets occur. And now, we get to the attributes that really excite us: their disease resistance, forage capabilities, and climate adaptability. Blackbellies like the high heat. They'll seek out shade when the sun is at its highest, but that's about all they need, even when they're placed in the Arizona desert. The trade-off for this high heat tolerance is growth rate. Blackbellies reach their adult weight at 2 years old, but can be slaughtered earlier than that. Since they're a relatively compact breed, it's not advised to slaughter before they reach 12 to 14 months of age to make the carcass worth your while. This longer growth rate is made worth the wait simply because they feed themselves so well. Blackbellies owe their forage capabilities to their feral ancestors. Even in the driest climates, they can find something to eat, and they can get much more nutrition from what's available than most. Many compare them to goats because of how frugal they can be with their feed, making the absolute most of what little they have. If there's even the least amount of forage available, chances are almost zero that you'll have to supplement them at all. There are few breeds of sheep that are as economical to keep as the blackbellies, and even though they do best in the heat, it doesn't mean you can't take them to colder climates. These little guys are happy no matter where you put them. However, they do require a little more care the colder it gets. They'll need you to provide them with well-insulated shelter if there's snow outside, and they'll require additional feed through the winter. They can't forage if everything's covered in snow. Blackbellies are valuable because they can feed themselves, and they don't need man-made shelters. So taking them to a place that gets snow takes a lot of that value out the window. Finally, we take a look at their disease resistance. Both breeds are known for their parasite resistance. They're so good at avoiding worm infestations that they're about as close to immune as a living being can get. The only time you'll hear of foot rot and hoof diseases from them is when they experience those snowy winters. Their stellar health is why they bring the additional market of crossbreeding with them. Crossbreeding flocks with blackbellies every few years is common practice to keep almost every breed alive healthier, especially in tropical climates where parasite pressure can get quite intense. All in all, whether you go for the Barbados or the American, the differences between the breeds are negligible. If you're tight on space, opt for the American. The Barbados drops so many lambs that homesteads and small holdings might struggle to keep up with the fast growth of a flock. Outside of their fertility, the horns and a little more black in their faces, the two breeds are very comparable to each other. Lean meat, forage capabilities, disease resistance, good fertility, and overall hardiness. Seriously, what more could you want from a sheep breed? They've got everything except for the wool. And let's face it, most of us aren't keeping sheep for their wool anymore anyway. Personally, we think the Barbados just barely crosses the finish line ahead of the American, for two reasons. The first, and most obvious reason, is the colossal amount of lambs they give. And secondly, because they don't have horns. Rams won't injure each other out in the field, and they won't injure you when the time comes to handle them. Though no matter which one you decide on, at the end of the day, they'll be some of the cheapest sheep breeds to rear, and the healthiest by a landslide. If you have the land to feed them, The blackbellies will virtually be pure profit once they get breeding. And like always, we pose the question to our viewers. Have you kept the Barbados blackbelly or the American blackbelly? Or are you one of the few who's reared both? How do they compare to each other? And which did you prefer? Let us know in the comments below. We can't wait to hear your thoughts. See you next time with another fascinating breed and all of their stats and facts. Cheers.